You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Well, welcome into another Three-Mod podcast. I am John Kurtz, joined as always by Derek Young from K-State Online, Cole Manbeck, former beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury, although these days he is taking down the beat writers of the world, as he was doing right before he hopped on here with us. The show brought to you by 360 Vodka from Holiday Distillery, also Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon. I believe they've got another bourbon on the way as well that I was just reading about in my email. So I suppose stay tuned for that. But anyway, Holiday Distillery, great K-State supporters. They support our podcast, so please support them. Big 12 tournament this weekend, boys. That means that you need to be stocked up on your Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon and your 360 Vodka. So get that all ready to go. And then I assume we all just reconvene at the artist formerly known as Sprint Center, a couple blocks away from where I sit right now. K-State does lose to West Virginia, but how are we feeling? What's the temperature here? Let's do like a vibe check. All right, the kids do a vibe check. We'll start with DY. Your vibe check on K-State heading into the most anticipated postseason that this team has played in quite a while.
Yeah, vibes are still high. I know that they lost to West Virginia after a 4-game win streak that included wins of the Oklahoma schools, Iowa State, and Baylor, but nothing about the West Virginia game was really discouraging for me. It's kind of how I expected it to unfold.
Yeah, no negative vibes here, John. I expected going into the West Virginia game that they would probably drop that one, and West Virginia shot out of its mind. I mean, Eric Stevenson made some tough shots. Now, yeah, K-State didn't play great defense at times, but they made tough shots. And when you factor in that Desi Sills wasn't available too, I mean, it's going to be a very hard place to win. Senior day, 6 seniors that play meaningful minutes for them. NCAA tournament locked up if they win. They know that. One of the largest crowds they've had in a long time. You factor all that together, like you expect to probably drop that game, and K-State did. So nothing overly alarming. They turned it over too much, but I think having Desi Sills would have helped limit that a little bit. So yeah, I don't take too much from that. And to go 4-1 over the last 5 games entering the Big 12 tournament, I think you feel pretty good about that.
Would agree. I mean, I said going into the game, like, it's kind of nice because I really don't have the same stress level that I would for a game, because it was like, from K-State's standpoint, I mean, yes, would have been nice to have it for the pursuit of a 2 seed, both in the Big 12 tournament and in the NCAA tournament. However, it's like, you weren't going to win a conference championship. That was out the window. So it just felt like this game standing in the way of all the postseason basketball, which is going to be really, really fun. And you knew West Virginia needed it badly. It was their senior day. You knew that they were going to come fired up like they needed it for the NCAA tournament. So nothing really surprised me. And yes, I think we did learn that Desi Sills is quite valuable. Honestly, I mean, maybe one takeaway from that game is like Desi was a snub from getting some honorable mention All Big 12 recognition if he's going to affect K-State like that when he's out. But yeah, I'm feeling all right. However, I guess I say all that to say, once we got into the game, there were moments of the game where, I was a little frustrated. It was frustrating to watch, especially jumping out early in the first half. But, I mean, West Virginia just got red hot, and they also got, I know I'm not going to be, like, complain about the ref guy. When I say, like, favorable whistle, it was just favorable in the fact that they let him play. It was a pretty physical game, and they weren't overly whistle-happy, which if you're Bob Huggins and you play that style, it's going to be a real problem if you do, and that certainly was not the case.
Yeah, whistle was conducive to West Virginia's style, and they've been this for years. They're a ball pressure team, and you play a ball pressure team without one of your better guards, you're in trouble.
And I think John and Derek, lowering the stress going into that game was just the fact that we watched Baylor lose to Iowa State right before the K-State game, so you already knew you were in the top 3 seeds. And what was important to, I think, all of us was to get out of KU's session and that side of the bracket. And you knew going into that game, you were already out of that at that point. And the Texas KU game was still to follow. You could still get to a 2 seed, but at the worst, you were going to be a 3. And then Oklahoma ends up beating TCU by 14. So then you get Iowa State out of K-State's side of the bracket, which I know a lot of people didn't mind playing Iowa State, but it definitely makes for what should be a more affordable ticket to session 3 Thursday night for the K-State game. I'm still holding off on buying, but I'm going to wait and see if they drop some more. But yeah, I mean, I think that also lowered the anxiety going into that West Virginia game as well.
Yeah, I believe me, I get it. And would lean to the side of like I would certainly rather avoid Kansas in the second game. Like, make it, if you're going to play Kansas, play them in the championship game. I'm pretty much always in favor of that. But Iowa State, yes, it would have been very annoying to have to play them with their fans enjoying Sandals, Kansas City, Sandals Power and Light heading over to the game. At the same time, I don't stress nearly as much about the draw in the Big 12 tournament or the NCAA tournament as a lot of people seem to be right now. I'm kind of just like, look, they've done enough to put themselves in a really good position, and no matter what, it's going to be really difficult. I guess to focus that down to the Big 12 tournament, I heard Jerome Tang actually make this point earlier this week in his press conference. He's kind of asked about TCU and thoughts on playing them and how that game goes, and he was sort of just like, I mean, yeah, like, look, TCU, I think when they're healthy and they're as talented as anybody in the league, but any game here was going to be tough. Like, you can try and sit there and splice together your perfect road in the Big 12 tournament, but like, there's not one. Like, there was so much parity. The last weekend displayed it, right? With Iowa State smacking Baylor, Oklahoma smacking TCU, K-State losing at West Virginia. It's just that there's no easy path. You could rearrange those any way you want. TCU, I guess I don't really know exactly what to make of them here at this point, but they do have that really, really high potential, a high ceiling, and we saw that in Fort Worth earlier this year. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. And I don't even really battle that much fatigue of playing TCU in the Big 12 tournament, even though it's happened quite a bit recently.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I definitely agree with you on the Big 12 tournament side of things. Whether you play Iowa State or you play TCU, I don't know that it really matters. Iowa State usually elevates their game in Kansas City anyways, and I know TCU as one of the higher upsides. I do think when you get down to the Big 12 tournament in your draw, you're probably grasping at straws a little bit, trying to quibble about what's a better draw and what isn't. I think Cole already nailed it. I think the biggest thing in terms of draw, I really think the only differentiator was becoming a 2 or a 3 seed and not having to play KU, who, has separated themselves from the rest of the Big 12, which is saying something because it is perhaps the best Big 12 ever, and Kansas has separated themselves from everyone else. So getting to avoid them until the final, I think, is huge. Now, I will say the NCAA tournament draw I do view as a little bit more important, and we could probably get into it later, but I've kind of crunched, a lot of the resumes together and everything, and to feel comfortable about playing in one of the nearby locations, and obviously that's Des Moines or Denver, to feel comfortable, I think Kansas State needs to probably win one in Kansas City.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree, DY. And as I look at the actual Big 12 tournament, like the differentiators between Iowa State and TCU are really, I think, neutralized by TCU's going to have no fans there. Iowa State would add 8,000, 9,000. K-State's going to have a significant home court advantage in this game. TCU's better than Iowa State in my mind, even though TCU did get swept by the Cyclones. So, I mean, I think they're a better team. But Iowa State also showed you on Saturday what they can do when they're on, right? They went down to Baylor and dominated that game really from start to finish and won by 15 points. So, and maybe they're getting going here right before they come to Kansas City at the right time. You mentioned it, John, they play well here. So I don't mind playing TCU. I know that they can be one of the top 15 teams in America with Mike Miles back. I certainly think they can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, but K-State split the season matchup. I know Miles wasn't there in the second game, but I think these two teams are pretty evenly matched when you look at the overall picture, and then the home court advantage maybe tilts things slightly to K-State's favor.
Is Iowa State? I would maybe make a case that Iowa State could be better now that they have this Caleb Grill thing behind them. And that a possibility out there, because I mean he's been a distraction throughout a lot of the year, whether it's been injury or undercutting a guy out on the court, and like certainly I'm very empathetic to him when it comes to mental health struggles, but it just is clear that like that had been something that was not working very well for them this year.
I don't think it was a coincidence that Iowa State played their best basketball when the game immediately after releasing Caleb Grill or cutting him, removing him, kicking him off the team, whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's a coincidence that they played a really good game and beat a really good team on the road, mind you. So that's one of the two items that I wanted to cover there. And as good as TCU is, and they are really good when they are playing their best basketball, and this isn't easy to do, but the way to beat them is already known, right? They're the worst shooting team in the Big 12, or at least one of them, or close to it, right? And they are so dependent upon the fast break. Now, they're super good at it. They might be the best in the country at it. But guess what? You don't get to go to your best weapon unless the other team's turning it over. So it's easier said than done, but the book is out. Everyone knows how to beat TCU. Take care of the ball, and you really limit their effectiveness.
Yeah, they have games where they'll catch fire a little bit from three. You look at the game in Lawrence when they shot it well, and there's been some other games this year, but more often than not, you give them the three-point shot, and you're going to have an advantage there. And K-State's done it. They did it especially in Manhattan, where they sagged off. Now, I know they didn't have Miles, but Miles is 32.6% from three this year. He's not even a great three-point shooter. TCU, you mentioned DY, they're 353rd out of 363 teams in three-point percentage on offense at 29.6%, I believe. And in the two matchups this year between K-State and TCU shooting a combined 6 of 36 from three, 16.7%. So sag off, make them take jumpers, make them take long twos, take threes, rebound the basketball, get after it on the offensive rebounding because they are a top 25 offensive rebounding percentage team. You got to capitalize when you get the stops and the missed shot goes up. But yeah, if you can take care of the basketball, which they didn't do in the first matchup, they had 20 turnovers to TCU's 10. But in the second matchup, TCU had 19 turnovers to K-State's 15. Take care of the ball. Don't let them get out and run in transition because they're one of the fastest and most athletic teams in the country. You can do that, you have a really good chance to beat them.
It's interesting to hear Jerome Tang talk about, like, hey, the first matchup, obviously they got out and ran all over the place. The second matchup, when they didn't have Miles and Lampkin was really limited, I mean, frankly, I think hurt them when he was out there on the floor in that game, that they did try to slow the tempo down a little bit more. They weren't quite as frenzied and quite as much in that mode. And it's easy to get sucked into remembering like the last 2 or 3 minutes of that game and how crazy it was, but it was a pretty tooth and nail game before that. So I guess the question I have bigger picture with the Big 12 tournament is, because I know another thing Jerome Tang said recently is that coaches privately at times would admit they'd kind of like to be one and done or 1 and 2 and done in the Big 12 tournament, almost prefer that to not get your legs all tired playing these intense games. Because, I mean, if you think about it, K-State's staring down a road of, like, if you're making it to the championship game of this thing, you're playing TCU, Texas, and Kansas back to back to back, right? I mean, you've already gone through this. We know this is the best league in America this year and maybe one of the best leagues ever, and you've gone through 18 games of that. Do you really need the mileage of 3 more of those in 3 days before you go to the NCAA tournament? I mean, to me, it's a legitimate debate. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, hey, I'm rooting for them to lose. I certainly would like to win the first game. I mean, I paid money for a ticket to the first game, so I certainly would like to win that. But I go into it kind of like the West Virginia game with an attitude of, like, you know, I want to see him play well. I want to see him do well. It'd be cool to win the Big 12 tournament, but at the same time, I will be far from heartbroken if this doesn't turn into a long weekend in Kansas City.
I will say, while Jerome Tang did have those comments, he has had a really good pulse of this team. He might have taken his foot off the accelerator a little too late, and I think he would probably admit to that. And I think he realized that after the Oklahoma and Texas Tech losses on the road. But other than that, he's really had the pulse of this team. And while he said those comments about, secretly coaches would like to be 1 and done or at least 2 and done in Kansas City and value the rest rather than the additional games, he flat out said that this team would take more value and be more benefited by winning the 3 games in 3 days. So for a guy that's really had the pulse of his team pretty well, I think he's really in tune to his players. I would probably relent to him in his opinion here, and he certainly thinks that. And with that, I will say that this team is kind of I wouldn't say emotional, but they kind of ride the waves. And I think going in with a pretty clear, positive mind would be pretty beneficial for this team. So I understand where Jerome Tang's coming from and probably would adhere to that. And I do think, especially if you play Friday, I mean, if you're playing Friday in Denver, and now Des Moines Thursday, but if you're playing Friday in Denver and even if you win the championship, you play Saturday night, I mean, that's almost a full week. They can get 2 or 3 days off.
Yeah, I mean, winning 3 games in 3 days, if you actually do it against the competition that John just outlined, you probably jump to a 2 seed in my mind. I mean, is there a huge difference between a 2 and a 3? I mean, I don't think there's a gigantic difference, and but location also matters in DY. I know you've crunched a lot of the numbers on that, but you look at the TCU game in itself. Yeah, you look at the TCU game in itself. If you win that, you get your 10th quad 1 win. You kind of separate from Gonzaga a little bit. They have 6 quad 1 wins. You get your 10th. I think that certainly helps. Now, you could also see that TCU is 28th in the net currently. So if K-State beats them, do they fall below 30, which would then take the home game in Manhattan where they beat TCU and make it a quad 2 win? If TCU falls beneath the 30 mark, we'll see. The neutral court one would no matter what be a quad 1 win because you just have to be top 50 on a neutral court in the net to be a quad 1. Look, you beat TCU, then you play a Texas potentially. You're only bolstering your strength of schedule more, right? Win or lose. You're adding another top 10 quad 1 game to your resume. Even if you lose it, your strength of schedule might go up a spot or 2. So, yeah, I want to get out of Thursday night. It makes the Big 12 tournament more fun to at least have Friday to look forward to. But after that, like I've said before, I was at the Iowa State game in 19 when K-State was, the 1 seed. And they played Iowa State the 4 or the 5 in that Friday night game in case it was up 4 or 5 points with 4 or 5 minutes left. And it really sucked losing that game because of the Iowa State fans around that were just obnoxious. But I wasn't that heartbroken because that team was so beat up. Dean Wade was already out. Snead had gotten beaten up in that game, Barry, that I thought they could use the rest. Now, it didn't pay off. They lost to Irvine in the first round, but that's kind of how I go into it, is get out of Thursday, get another quad 1 win, and then whatever happens Friday happens. It'd be fun to beat Texas again. And DY, I don't know, Texas has 11 quad 1 wins. In case they beat TCU and they beat Texas, they both have 11 quad 1 wins. And K-State would have beat them on a neutral court and in Austin. And I don't know, could that boost K-State above Texas in the seeding location?
I've like I said, I've done a lot of this, and I will just say that there is a gap after the 3 teams. It's the top 3 is all in a kind of a group where it's pretty indistinguishable, and it's Kansas, Alabama, and Houston. Then the next group that's pretty indistinguishable, 4 or 5, is UCLA and Purdue. And then the next one is 6, 7. And I know it's going to sound crazy to Kansas State fans because they swept one of these teams, but it's Texas and Baylor. I think it's just because of the work that they did in the non-conference. Their metrics are a lot better. They have more quad 1 wins. Baylor doesn't have a quad 2 loss. Kansas State does. So it's straight the schedule is heavily in those 2 teams' favor too. That's why they have a decidedly better resume as it stands. Now, if Kansas State wins the NCAA or Big 12 tournament, can that change? Maybe with the Baylor part, if you can beat, and especially if you can beat Baylor a 3rd time. I just don't see them jumping Texas. I don't know if there's really anything they can do unless Texas were to lose to Oklahoma and it'd be a quad 2 loss, but I don't think that it is because it's a neutral site game. So it's hard to see that happening because the biggest changes to anyone's resume the rest of the way, and people don't understand this, the metrics aren't going to change right now. If a big win or a big loss is not going to make you jump 7 spots in the net or strength of record or anything, those things aren't going to change. Strength of schedule is really not going to change. A lot of these things that are on the team sheet that the committee is going to consider are already baked in. The only thing that's really going to change a lot between now and the time that they release the bracket is a quad 1 win or a quad 2 loss. And are those little things enough to jump one team over another in a conference tournament? We saw last year when the committee came out with the bracket, it wasn't. Tennessee went super scorching hot and won the SEC tournament, beat a lot of good teams. And they didn't even get a 2 seed. They were a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament last year, and everyone thought they would be a 2 seed. So conference tournaments the last few years, and I understand why, they just have not moved the needle much at all. So I don't know that Kansas State can really go up much, but guess what? I don't think they can go really down much either. They're more likely to be a 2 seed than a 4 seed still.
Well, Gonzaga just moved from 9 to 6 in the net because they blew the doors off of St. Mary's, which is one of the most overvalued teams in the analytics and metrics in America, and beat them by 26 last night. So, now they're top 6 in the net. Do they have an advantage that their conference tournament ended on Tuesday night and the committee has more time to look at them and what they've done? I don't know. But you're right. I mean, most of
that is one of the teams that Kansas State is very much alike resume-wise. Because I was going to get into that next group. To me, it's 8-11, and it's Arizona, Kansas State, Marquette, and Gonzaga. They're all very, very similar. So maybe that little thing right there boosts Gonzaga just a little bit. Like I said, that those are one of the reasons why Kansas State kind of needs to go up one, right? Because if you fall below all of those teams, Arizona, Marquette, and Gonzaga, you're probably playing in Columbus or Orlando. And obviously that's not something that you would want to do. Now, to drop to a 4 seed, you have to drop below 12, right? The way that it goes, how they rank them, because teams 9th through 12th are 3 seeds. Now, if Kansas State were to drop to that, I think that would require Kansas State being one and done, and then UConn doing really well in the tournament because they're not too far behind Kansas State, or Tennessee doing well in the SEC tournament and showing that they can play really, really well without Zakai Ziegler.
Couple of thoughts come to mind here. I understand the Baylor-Texas thing. I know that's hard for some people to get through their head, but like the committee is not viewing it just as solely like, hey, you swept this team. They've got to take the total picture of everybody, because if you started doing comparisons to every single team, it would not work out. I feel fairly resigned to, hey, they're probably going to be a 3. I mean, unless maybe you win the Big 12 tournament, probably going to be a 3. But the caveat to that would be they got a lot more respect from the committee when that top 16 came out, which was right before K-State won 4 or 5, than I was anticipating, with them being a 3 then. So it is very much possible that the committee thinks higher of K-State than like Joe Lunardi does right now. And we'll see the classic, 10 minutes before the bracket comes out, Lunardi switches things up, and all of a sudden K-State vaults up a couple of lines, because that's just what happens. I'm not sure. I guess the point being, I'm not sure how much he really knows. Now, Jerry Palm still has K-State as a 2. I feel like that would be more in line with what the committee thought of them. What was that, 4 weeks ago, when the 16 dropped? So that's kind of it's very rudimentary analysis here, but it's also sort of why I just throw my hands up and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to worry stressing too much about it all, because a 2 seed or a 3 seed seems great. I'm fine. I'll take it. I don't think there's risk of dropping to a 4. So I'm just like, look, what's going to happen is what's going to happen. They put themselves in a great position. It's kind of it's always an exhibition sort of tournament at the Big 12 tournament anyway, but it feels more and more like that these years. So just go, have fun, enjoy it, enjoy watching this team play, enjoy the spectacle of the Big 12 tournament, and then let the cards fall where they may as far as the NCAA tourney goes.
Yeah, to me, it's not so much what seed you are, although if you're a 4, it's more about where you're playing in the first and second round, because I think those things do apply advantages. So I think playing in Denver or Des Moines is important for Kansas State. I mean, there's a reason why they played better when they have a crowd advantage. Heck, Water, when at the end of the game, they had a crowd advantage, so to speak. So I do think those things matter. It's possible that they are a 2 right now. I'm not going to discredit that, Jerry Palm, because to me, like I said, they're right there with Arizona, Marquette, and Gonzaga. And if you have Kansas State number 1 out of those 4, then they are the worst 2 seed. So that is very much in play. I have Kansas State number 9, just a touch ahead of Marquette and Gonzaga. And I'd have to look at it, what it means if now that Gonzaga has even more on their resume. But I really don't know if these conference tournaments are going to move the needle terribly much unless you get a quad 2 or quad 3 loss. So that's what I'm saying. I think the only way the conference tournaments really dictate movement on the NCAA tournament is if you have an early exit to a really bad team.
Yeah, I mean, I think location matters, because location is, you get on these really neutral courts in the NCAA tournament, right, where you're far away from home, and that's when a lot of the upsets happen, because if you don't have your fans there to lift you up, the rest of the arena, when the underdog is staying within arm's length, as the game goes on, all the opposing fans start to pull for that team, and you can sense the nervous energy in the arena and the momentum pick up. So I do think, if you're playing in Orlando or in Albany or far away from home, you're going to have all of the other teams.
Or if you're playing LaSalle in Kansas City,
Well, I would argue, John, that the crowd is really what brought K-State back in that game to come all the way back from that. I mean, that place was roaring, and otherwise they're probably dead in the water. Now, what I was going to say is, I was just going to say, DY, that now if you're in Des Moines and Creighton is your 6 seed opponent, and they're 2 hours from campus in Omaha, then it really neutralizes that. And I think it would suck to have to play a preseason top 10 team that's number 14 in KenPom and number 12 in the net as a 6 seed. That kind of feels like K-State getting Kentucky in the 8-9 in St. Louis a few years ago, or 10 years ago when they played them, and the Kentucky made it to the national title.
Yeah, that's why I've said all along the best case scenario might actually be Denver, because there's also a scenario where you're sharing Denver with Baylor, and guess what? Baylor's going to be a bunch of Kansas State fans too, because they love Jerome Tang. So I wouldn't mind Denver, and that's why I thought that they would make best case scenario for the Wildcats. What best case scenario also is, if you want to know like what to root for or against in the upcoming conference tournaments. Look, Gonzaga's already done. They won the conference tournament. Texas and Baylor, they're not going to have any bad losses because they play in the Big 12 tournament, and there's no quad 2 game in Kansas City. So that's just the way it is. But if you want to ensure maybe Denver or Des Moines, Arizona and Marquette, I'm guessing their first conference tournament game will be quad 2. I don't know that they'll have quad 1 games all the way through. I really doubt it from a Pac-12 and Big East perspective. So having Arizona or Marquette lose that first game would be pretty huge for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I get it. Cole, how good was K-State played Jimmer in the round of 32, right? Now, Oklahoma City, K-State had a crowd advantage there back in the 2009-2010 year. But that was a pretty damn good team and a hyped up team.
Yeah.
Out there and fell behind 10-0, but then handled them pretty well from that point. So I don't know. You guys are making very good points. I completely I get it. I do get it. Although I think the road struggles of this team have been over exaggerated because it's the goddamn Big 12.
I agree.
They won the third most road games of anybody in the Big 12 this year, and they won in Austin and Waco. So I get a little annoyed with people the road struggles of this team. It's going to be different at a neutral site playing teams outside of the Big 12. I think that will really help. But yes, they clearly are a much better team at home, and with the fan support and that stuff would be great. And the thing that great of all the scenarios you guys just laid out, to me, the one that I would want to avoid the most is playing Creighton in Des Moines. That I think is the worst case scenario of anything that's in the realm of possibility right now.
I agree from a competitive and performance standpoint. Of course, I wouldn't want that game, or even if it's Iowa, right? Iowa would flood Des Moines as well.
Iowa got swept by Nebraska DY. They lost both games in Nebraska this year. Got that?
Yeah, but I would still want Kansas State fans to have
I know.
Gobble up. Yeah. But I will. The second thing is if worst case scenario ends up being Columbus, I'll just tell everyone where to go and we'll have a good time, right? So I know where we need to be if we're playing in Columbus. So to be honest, as a last resort, I would be able to stomach Columbus just because of my experience. Obviously, just I don't want to go to Albany or Orlando. I don't know what the hell's in Albany, New York right now this time of year. I don't think anyone wants to be there.
I don't want to go back to Sacramento either after the K-State played Cincinnati there. I don't want to go back to the state of California. Bad vibes have happened in California. San Jose, Sacramento. John, to your
Sacramento's not possible.
No, I know. Yeah. John, to your point about BYU, I was actually looking this up the other day because I was curious about the 2010 seedings, who K-State played and how they were evaluated in the metrics. And so if you look at KenPom, BYU is the number 10 team in the country, and they got them as a 7 seed, K-State did in that game. And then Xavier, who was a 6 seed, was number 18 in the country in KenPom. So you actually got a harder draw via KenPom in the second round game than you did in the Sweet 16 game. And then Butler was ranked number 12 in KenPom. So actually, the second round game via KenPom was your toughest game in terms of the efficiency metrics. So yeah, look, you're going to play a good team in that second round game, especially there's more parity in basketball right now. Every team has flaws, and so you could lose any given night. And when you look at the 6 and the 7 seeds, Iowa, Michigan State, Kentucky, whoever you're playing, it's going to be difficult because those are all very talented teams.
By the way, UConn could be a freaking handful as a 4 or a 5 seed for someone. I think they're top 5 in KenPom.
I guess I also just sort of view it, Cole, you also just never know what's going to happen. And we can, to your point about all the parity and all that, we can sit here and get really wound up about what the possibilities are. But then you have years win 2 Big 12. You win a Big 12 championship, you're going up against a play-in game winner in freaking Kansas City and you lose to LaSalle. Or on the other side, everybody's wanted Bruce fired the entire year. You think it's basically going to be the end, but they get into the NCAA tournament, and then you have the first 1 seed loss in NCAA tournament history ahead of you, and all of a sudden you're in the Sweet 16, and without Dean Wade, you go beat freaking Kentucky to get to the Elite Eight. So, like, it just, I don't know. I just kind of throw my hands up a little bit at it. Like, I can sit here and spin my wheels and get real worried and upset about every little thing, but, like, I mean, I've watched Kansas enough to know that this is kind of how it works, right? And Jerome Tang has made this point a lot, and it's great. It's like the idea is to have a team good enough to compete for the Big 12 every single year, which means you'll have a team good enough to compete for a national championship every single year, and you just let the cards fall where they may, right? I mean, Bill Self last year, nobody would say that was his best team or one of his 2 best teams at Kansas, but they won the national championship. The team, I saw Ali Faroukmanesh highlights going across social media the other day. Shout out to whoever did that. We'll always love that. That Kansas team was like number 1 the entire year. Sharon Collins, Cole Alder, like they were incredible. They won in Manhattan over the 2009-2010 K-State team with game day there. They went out and farted out a loss to Northern Iowa in the second round. That's just kind of how it goes. I'm just like, look, be a good enough team to have a high seed every year in the NCAA tournament, and at some point, it'll take care of itself, no matter how good you actually are or aren't, as we've seen with like Bill Self in Kansas.
But don't dismiss the content, John. We're content creators.
Well, I get that. Yes, I do. I get that.
I mean, you're right, John. Like, it's a crapshoot. Like, a lot of it is matchup driven. Some teams you're going to match up better against than others in the NCAA tournament, but it's also there's some teams just catch fire. I mean, in basketball, you can have an on night and shots are falling and the momentum builds, and you start to get frustrated, and the pressure builds as a better seed in the NCAA tournament. So I completely agree with that. I mean, all you have to look at is what you mentioned with the Kentucky game without Dean Wade. That was a Kentucky team that had 7 or 8 guys that are in the NBA now, or have played in the NBA since, between Knox and Washington and all of those guys, even Hamidou Ballo, or I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but I mean, they had so many dudes that went on to play in the NBA, and K-State's out there with Ahmad Wainwright grabbing a rebound in the last minute of the game to go to the free throw line to potentially ice the game. So yeah, and Mike McGurl out there. So yeah, you never know what's going to happen in the tournament. So yeah, it's great for content and to talk about it, and it's sure fun to talk about it and be relevant in March than be irrelevant and have nothing to look forward to. But at the end of the day, they just got to go play well.
And that was the same Kansas State team that needed Mike McGurl, who played very little all year, to beat Creighton in the first round.
Yeah, like I remember going into that game like, all right, if they lose this game, the voices are still going to be pretty loud here about Bruce. Like, how much longer is this going to last? And then they rip off that whole run to go to the Elite Eight, and everything changed as they parlay that into a Big 12 championship. So, yeah, point being, you want a program. I mean, the whole deal with the NCAA tournament, it is not the NFL playoffs where the cream's going to rise to the top, or the NBA playoffs where the cream's going to rise to the top. You've just got to have a team good enough to be a high seed and let it go every single year.
Well, and Jerome Tang knows firsthand, and this isn't to put bad vibes on anything, but, you know, at Baylor, they lost to Yale as a 3 seed in the 3-14, and they lost to Georgia State in the 3-14. You know, when Georgia State hit that deep 3, whatever, and the coach fell out of his chair. They've had some very talented teams that have won. Now, I'm not putting those vibes on Kansas State. I'm just saying that, like, that's just another example of, you know, what can happen in the tournament. And there was that one year where 3 2 seeds went out before the second weekend. So anything can happen. And if you can get to the second weekend in the NCAA tournament this year, I think you just feel great about the year, because getting to that second weekend means you're getting talked about another week on the national scene, and you have something to look forward to. And so it does make me respect more what like KU's done over the years, right? Because when I watch KU, I'm like, oh, they're playing Providence in the Sweet 16, a 4 or 5 seed. Like, that's an easy draw for them. But in reality, if that was K-State playing that team, I'd be stressed the hell out. And, you know, it's hard to win in the tournament.
Well, and again, I would just say, like, some of that's about just being there every year. Like, if you're there every year, sometimes you get a kiss, and Virginia loses to UMBC. And then some years you don't get a kiss, and you're at an 8-9 game with Kentucky in the first round, who goes on to the Final Four, to just pull from K-State examples. So yeah, it's even just about how the bracket breaks around you. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the All Big 12 awards, right? So Jerome Tang is your Big 12 Coach of the Year. That came from both coaches and the media, correct at this point, right? We got the media award list, and he got them both, which very, very, very glad to see that. Very glad to see that for not even really the Bill Self reason, because like I get it, like I understand that one, but it was like to me, this is probably hits home more to us in Kansas City, being around 3 local schools that get talked about a lot because they're all 3 having pretty good seasons. And the only reason I have to put the qualifier pretty in front of there is thanks to our friends in Columbia, Missouri. But that's exactly my point. Like everything gets lumped into like, oh, you have these 3 amazing coaches. They all could be National Coach of the Year. The SEC chose co-coaches of the year, neither of which was Dennis Gates. And thank you. I could not, if I could just thank you to the SEC coaches for doing that and humbling the Tigers a little bit here. Like, it just, the way I hear it talked about like on the radio around Kansas City, it's always lumping them into the same, Tang and Gates, like both doing this incredible job, this equally incredible job. And I'm like, no, the hell out of here with that. Like, Dennis Gates did a good job. Jerome Tang did an unbelievable job. I mean, in the words of Meek Mill, there's levels to this shit. And they're on a different level. Mizzou is a different level than what Jerome Tang did this year. Like, what? It's so annoying. That has been one of the most annoying storylines to me being a Kansas Cityan here throughout the basketball season. So Tang actually able to take those home over Self, which I would have understood the Self thing, but to be able to get those and then have that happen to Dennis Gates, I had to crack a smile. And it's nothing against Dennis Gates personally. It's mainly the hellscape of Missouri fans. But that's where I'm at.
Okay, my comment will be this. Guys, I seen the whole thing. It was like, well, Kansas State is a quad 2 loss. Missouri doesn't have a quad 2 loss. Okay, if we're going to do
that whole talking point, I mean, good.
I know. So I'm going to clap back a little bit. Okay, well, we both played KU at home. If we're going to take these like minimal details and try to apply it to an award, one got 40 balled at home and one won.
You guys saw some of the pushback I got on Saturday.
I know how you feel about this, Cole. The whole world knows how you feel about this.
Yeah. I just won't really get into it too much, but I thought it was joking. But then I got some pushback from another Missouri person who laughed at me for using Ken Palm and the net. Now I'm not going after Tucker really. Even there was somebody else that was going at me.
I see Jordan's note here. I love Tucker.
Yeah.
Yes, I hit him with the little Grant postmortem laughing, which, all in good fun, right? Justified. And I feel like Tucker was digging at K-State fans a little bit there, which I get it. Mizzou athletics has been, can I say the F word? Dreadful. Has been dreadful for a very long time. And they finally have, after a terrible football season where their coach has just embarrassed himself on and off the field, they finally have a nice little, hey, we're going to the NCAA tournament. So I get it why you would want to, be proud of it and defend your guy. I understand, but it is a ludicrous comparison and very much rooted in just fan stuff. But Tucker is not the reason that you guys know. I had been talking to you about this long before Tucker's tweet the other day. Like, I listen to, and I love the shows that I do listen to in Kansas City Sports Talk Radio, but I just so often hear it lumped into Gates and Tang. And I was like, look, one guy is plodding along and is going to be like a 7 seed, and that's great. And another guy has been flirting with a 1 seed after being picked dead last with only 2 players. So I don't know this situation well enough, but the argument that I kept seeing that was driving me nuts was, well, Dennis Gates inherited a worse situation. I mean, like, wasn't Mizzou in the tournament a couple of years ago? I mean, Kwanzaa wasn't great, but whatsoever, that was 3 years of last or next to last. They were like 20 games under 500 overall record for a 3-year stretch. Like, they were bad. And then the only thing they had last year was Nigel Packett. He left for nice cars in Miami. So
all you could, there was the pushback that Gates inherited a worse situation, and I was flabbergasted at that. I mean, I don't really see any difference other than the only thing is K-State's had higher levels of success recently. If you go back to 19 and winning a Big 12 title, Kwanzaa Martin was more like, get in as like a 9 or 10 seed in the NCAA tournament.
They're too far removed from what Dennis Gates is freaking doing this year.
Well, no, you're right. And so it's Missouri returned Kobe Brown, a really good player. K-State returned Marquise Noel, a really good player. And there was really nobody else. And so to me, it's there's not much difference in it. And look, co-coaches of the year in the SEC, Jerry Stackhouse's Vanderbilt Commodores that are 81 in Ken Palm and 83rd in the net right now got co-coach of the year. All right. So, and they were better last year, as KSU_fan pointed out to us. I think they were 64th in Ken Palm last year, Vanderbilt. So they actually are worse, and he got co-coach of the year.
Well, and I heard this. I was listening to Gary Parrish on with Seren, and I mean, I love that is one of my favorite segments of the week to listen to on Kansas City Sports Talk Radio. But he did say, he was like, hey, he said he felt like Dennis Gates got a little disrespected there, but he also made the point, he was like, if the Brandon Miller stuff wasn't going on at Alabama, he said, like, Nate Oates, like, they were like a back into the top 25 preseason team, right? Like at Bama, and then they've been sitting here as, the best team in the country, arguably, for a good chunk of the year. He was like, if not for that, and Nate Oates and the handling of it and all that stuff, which obviously has been dreadful, but if not for that, like, it could be, Dennis Gates could have finished 4th in the SEC. So, I mean, hey, congrats on being the 4th best coach in the SEC. That's great. I'm happy for you, Mizzou.
I have sorry to cut in here with a different topic. I just got someone tipped me off here. The reason why, so I was been confused why Houston has been in Columbus in the last couple of Lunardi brackets. It's because not all 4 number 1 seeds can be on the same day. So Houston might be screwed if they are the 3rd 1 seed, and they might get to ship to Columbus instead of Birmingham because of that. That happens. Texas can go to Birmingham, and Kansas State does have a clearer path to Denver or Des Moines.
Oh, well, okay. Good work, DY. That'd be interesting where they put Houston. I don't know where they had them in the Midwest in the bracket reveal. And, like we talked about, K-State was number 12 overall in the bracket reveal and the seeding, the worst 3 seed, but they added 3 quad 1 wins and a quad 2 since. So
I think this is just 1st and 2nd round location, because if UCLA is in Sacramento, Alabama's in Birmingham, what am I at the one? Kansas is in Des Moines. Then they would all be Thursday, Saturday, and they can't do that.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Look, this seeding stuff is way more complicated than I ever realized. I just thought I didn't know all these different things that they have to look at. But anyways, that's interesting. And John, the bottom line is Jerome Tang is the Big 12 Coach of the Year, and will probably get a lot of National Coach of the Year awards as a result if he's getting in his own conference over Bill Self, who I think is probably one of the bigger contenders for National Coach of the Year as well. I think he's probably going to get a lot of National Coach of the Year awards, and just a remarkable job and a great time to be a Kansas State fan with what Chris Kleiman's done on the football field this year, and then Jerome Tang on the basketball court. I mean, on the hardwood, it's pretty special to have a top 10 football program and arguably a top 10 basketball program in the same season, same year.
Yeah. It's Shaka Smart. I think Gary Parrish said the other day that Shaka Smart would be number 2.
He's done a nice job
behind Bill Self for National Coach of the Year. So you had Tang 3rd. So you may see Shaka Smart take home some of those 2.
Yeah, to be honest, and I will say this, if Shaka Smart or Bill Self get National Coach of the Year over Jerome Tang on any of the publications, those are ones that would be a little bit harder for me to argue against.
I mean, I'll argue against Self, but I understand it. Yes, those are respectable choices.
Shaka, that was big actually. Shaka does deserve a lot of clout.
I'm not familiar enough. I honestly, I have no real opinion. I just know that that's the consensus thing. They won the Big East, right? So.
And they're going to be, and they might get a seed as well. So
yeah, and on the Mizzou topic, Tucker hears so much shit talking from us during football season about Drankowitz that I don't blame him at all for pushing out that tweet and baiting me into that. So he got me baited, and
I also wouldn't assume that it was just about us. I think it's K-State fans as a whole. I mean,
I agree. I completely agree.
Put him up. Like the Twitter account. Yep.
Yeah. The rest of the all Big 12 teams, Keontae and Marquise, both first team. They were not unanimous on the coaches team. I think Keontae was on the AP, right? So you at least got that, which makes sense. I understand how Marquise is more polarizing because of the turnovers, that rough stretch that he went through for a big portion of the year. But I also understand, like, Jalen Wilson gets unanimous player of the year, and Cole, what is the case? I mean, I know you were kind of billing it like there is a case for Marquise Noel there to at least you would have thought maybe siphoned off a vote or two.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was surprised it was completely unanimous, and I think that's a bit laziness on some people's ends to do that. And I saw some people saying there's not really an argument at all for anybody but Jalen Wilson. And look, I think you can certainly make a strong case for others. I'm not going to argue Jalen Wilson is, the Big 12 player of the year. He's on the league champ, and, his stats are very impressive. He's a really good player. He's an All-American. So I'm not going to dispute that, but to note that there's not an argument to be made would be just completely incorrect and laziness because, Marquise has the 6th best assists per game in Big 12 history right now behind Doug Gottlieb, Trae Young, and TJ Ford in multiple seasons with 7.7 assists per game. You look at his numbers overall, leads the league in Big 12 play only in scoring, in assists, in steals. I think he's averaging the highest steals per game in like 9 or 10 seasons in the Big 12 with 2.6 per game. So you could make an argument for him. Hell, you could make a really strong argument for Keontae Johnson, guys, when you look at the overall body of work, because you look at Keontae, Jalen Wilson shot 41% from the floor this year and 33% from three, which aren't incredibly efficient numbers, especially for a forward. Now he goes out and shoots a lot of threes as well. Keontae Johnson finished 2nd overall in the season in scoring at 17.8 points per game, was top 5 in rebounding in the league, but he shot 52% from the floor compared to Jalen Wilson's 41%, and he shot nearly 43% from three compared to 33% for Jalen Wilson. And in fact, Keontae Johnson, if you looked at people and the players in the Big 12 that attempted at least 70 threes or more this year, Keontae attempted 99. His three-point shooting percentage is the best of any player in the entire league at 42.4%. So I think a very strong argument can be made for Keontae just because of how much more efficient he was from a shooting perspective, and he got after it on the glass.
Yep. No, he's had a really good year. I know we're kind of going longer already than we thought, but I'll just toss in a little bit of my head scratchers to me. Kurtz alluded to it very lightly, but Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson for the coaches not being unanimous all Big 12 first team, but Adam Flagler was. I think that's
Mike Boynton, right? We know it was Mike Boynton who left Keesaw.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, because Mike Boynton. Yeah, Mike Boynton, after he lost against State, kind of hinted that maybe Marquise is a second team all Big 12 player. So maybe that's him. But Flagler getting unanimous is a little interesting to me because it's like you could have left Flagler off for Mike Miles. I think that would have been a lot easier to do. So that one's a head scratcher for me. Gabe Kalsher getting second team is a head scratcher to me just because of the way that he performed in the last half of the year. His numbers did not scream second team. Kevin McCullough, in my opinion, did not scream third team. Heck, I would have gone with DeJuan Harris over Kevin McCullough for third team because to me, DeJuan Harris was the key to Kansas just going off in the last half of the year, running away with the Big 12 championship. But credit to Jalen Wilson for getting Big 12 player of the year, but the difference maker for Kansas in the second half, in my opinion, was DeJuan Harris's play. So I would have went him. And then another award that I didn't think KU should have got was actually most improved player. Like KJ Adams did improve a lot this year, but Marquise Noel is the most improved player in the Big 12.
I was told that KJ Adams is a complete albatross, and the fact that Bill Self was winning games with him having to play as a starting forward was, the reason that he's the coaching czar that he is. Kansas fans have led me to believe that KJ Adams couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. So that is pretty remarkable to me that he winds up being most improved player in the league over Marquise freaking Noel. But, hey, I digress. There was something else. Cole, what was Kansas's record without Jalen Wilson? That's the other thing too. Like, I feel like that was where it's like Kansas functioned just as well, if not better, without Jalen Wilson, right? How's K-State functioning without Marquise Noel? I mean, thankfully we haven't really had to find out.
what was it? I sent it to you guys. They when he went on that 3-game stretch where he averaged close to 30 points per game and shot the ball really well, like 50% from the floor. They went 0-3. They lost all 3 games. And then they've now won 9 of their last 10. And in that time span, Wilson is shooting 37% from the floor and around 29% from 3.
That goes into my point. I think DeJuan Harris is actually their difference maker. And credit to him because I did not give him enough respect at the beginning of this year.
I mean, I think he's the key to their team. He makes everything go. And in the national championship last year, he was the one that really swung that game with his defense. It's his defense. And when he's, ability to hit the floater and drive in and score a little bit and hit an occasional 3, I think he is the difference. And if he's playing well, they can get by teams. If he's having a bad game like he did in Manhattan against K-State, now I think he had 11 assists, but he didn't play well. They struggle.
Yep. Yeah, Jalen Wilson to me is he's just a little more vanity than anything else. He's like the vanity choice from that team, which I don't know. I would love Truth Serum and Bill Self. Get a couple Bill Self margaritas from the Salty Iguana in that guy and see what he would tell us about who the best player actually is on the team and in the league.
McCaller. Thank you. He'd probably tell you, Kevin.
That's a nod to our story.
The most important players were Harris, and to be honest, they really need to get Grady Dick going because he's kind of struggled offensively lately.
I was just gonna say, it feels like Dick has kind of faded a little bit, right? I mean, I don't know.
And is he projected as a lottery pick in this upcoming draft, Dick?
Probably. He's a really toolsy guy. I mean, I
was gonna say, I don't have any problem with that. I think he's got a world of potential in the league for sure.
I think he's got to get he's got to get stronger. He's got to be able to put the ball on the floor and create his own shot. Right now, I don't see that.
I was gonna say, I'd send him do that, man. He drives to the rim, he dunks on people. I don't know.
To be honest, he's at least 4 or 5 times the NBA prospect that Christian Brown was. And Christian Brown still, I think, squeaked in the last half of the first round, if I remember correctly. I would be shocked if Grady Dick didn't go in the lottery. He's 6'7", could put on the floor and shoot at over 35% from 3.
Cole, that's been my guy. I mean, I loved Grady Dick from the second that I saw him playing this year in terms of just who I thought was great on that team. So you're going to get pushback from me on that, but I get it.
I mean, I pushed back on you guys when you were saying Grady Dick might be the best player in the league before Big 12 play, and I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I was clearly correct that he's not anywhere close.
Second team All Big 12 though, right?
That's a lot different than I was arguing with you guys. I was like, I think Keontae is better. I mean, Keontae is better because he's a senior, right? I mean, you got a lot of veteran guys in this league that have been through it. Now, if Grady Dick played in this league for 3 or 4 years, it would be insane what he could do. And thank God he won't.
There's one last point that I want to make on this. Is there any, and I know this is just a thought that creeped into my head, but this is more like the paranoid, anxious fan in March, right? Marquise Noel was clearly motivated by the fact that he did not get Big 12 Player of the Year, right? We saw a tweet from him. We saw tweets from his brother when they got the news about that. Is there any fear of Marquise getting into a mode of trying to press and do too much to get into hey, I've got to prove everybody wrong again because they didn't make me Big 12 Player of the Year? That was a brief fleeting thought that popped into my mind because clearly the team, this 4 or 5 stretch where they've been so much better, huge part of that has been him, as Jerome Tang would say, laying up for the single as opposed to trying to hit home runs.
I think his brother probably more so. So I don't think Marquise, I think he's kind of in a new spot in life where those things, he's more about proving people right than people wrong. I really do. I think he's kind of turned a leaf in that way. On the reverse side, even if he hasn't, Cole tweeted out this clip from us at Big 12 Media Days where he was kind of admitted that he felt scorned by not being given all Big 12 honors before the year in the preseason selections, where there was not a peep about him even on honorable mention, nothing, right? And he said he noted that. And you know what? The first 70% of this season, he was the Big 12 Player of the Year runaway. So maybe when he feels that way is actually when he plays his best basketball.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, clearly he is a guy that thrives off being doubted, and he said as much. And so if you criticize or doubt him or overlook him, he seems to go to another level and play well. So I think he takes it personal. And yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if he takes things here in the postseason and to another level. Now, you don't want him to try and do too much, right? And, force the issue, because that's when he can get in a little bit of trouble. But yeah, I think he's certainly a guy that thrives off being a doubter.
I don't worry about it anymore. I really don't.
Okay. All right. Well, as I admitted, that was a bit of a paranoid thought by me, but I think you guys made a compelling case. Could work the exact opposite way, and it would all be great. It's going to be tense times. Maybe not this week, but once we get through this week, I mean, yeah, it'll be really tense times.
When it comes to I want to make one last comment, and it's something I'm probably going to write about at some point. When it comes to conference tournament, NCAA tournament, difference makers, and what can kind of uplift certain teams over another is the ability of guard play. Guard play does well in a tournament. If you're, predicated on the bigs, it cannot go well for you at times. Just ask Purdue, and they're predicated on bigs every year, and they always exit early. So I don't know that there's another team in the country that has a second point guard as good as Desi Sills. So I wonder if that comes into play and really is a lift for Kansas State. Having two like Marquise Noel and Desi Sills is rare. I mean, there'll be some teams that we're going to see, in March that are kind of built that way. We're like, whoa, they have two really good guards too. But there's not going to be many, and Kansas State's going to be one of them.
D.Y., you got your binoculars for the Big 12 tournament ready, so you can see the action down there from 1,000 feet above, up in the mountains?
Yeah, that's going to be that's going to take away the tournament experience a bit for me, I'm not going to lie. But I'm not going to complain about it. I think the problem for the Big 12 is they better sell those damn tickets from those seats that they give away that were once ours, because it doesn't sound like they are.
Well, I bought one, so.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, yeah. You know what? You have a hefty salary, because those things are about triple the price of what they should be.
Yeah, Brett Yormark was advised to not price them as high as he did by the league's athletic directors, and he did not listen to that, and perhaps undervalued or underestimated that people aren't willing to spend that type of money to sit a little closer to the court.
Man, Fat Joe just ain't what he used to be, I guess, is really what we've learned.
Or we'll see. Let's see how those Big 12 coaches react to having those cameras in the huddle as well, because I'm sure he'll love that.
Yeah.
No, it'd be good for us. It's entertaining for us.
Well, I'm not watching.
I guess I really won't be either. I bought a ticket for the TCU game. I also have a credential, so I'll probably be mixing and matching. It'll be a fun weekend here at KC.
One question: are you going to eat any of the team-themed foods that are on the menu at the T-Mobile Center?
Probably not.
No,
probably not.
No, I'm going to eat before I get there, and I don't have a ticket yet. Actually, I was joking, obviously, about the court side. So, if anybody has any tickets for me, no, I'll wait it out on StubHub. I expect if you're waiting, there's going to be a couple teams that lose here on Wednesday night in the tournament. It won't be a lot, but there'll be some dumping tickets, and the same tomorrow.
All right. Well, we appreciate our friends at Holiday Distillery bringing this beautiful podcast to you each and every week. Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon, 360 vodka, whatever it is you need, they've got you covered. Get ready for the Big 12 tournament in style with all of that. That's going to wrap it up for us. We appreciate the work of Jordan Foote behind the scenes, as always. Special shout out to our guy, Tucker. We love you, Tucker. We do. We may not love Dennis Gates as much as you do, but we do love you. Appreciate everybody who helps make this happen for you each and every week. Derek Young, Cole Manbeck, John Kurtz signing off here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Free.
Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. Check out these videos that feature our team of more than 15 former players, insiders, and analysts, bringing you the best Chiefs coverage you can find. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.